Hello, everybody. I am Todd Simmons. I'm the Executive Director of Jefferson Performing Arts Society. And today our community conversation is about our upcoming production of Shrek and about self-acceptance. So before we get into that, I want to introduce our wonderful panel we have today. Let us start. First off, thank you all very much for being here to discuss this with us today. And let's start with Kenzie. Would you give us a little introduction about yourself and tell us a couple minutes about who you are?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kenzie. I hope y'all can hear me all right. My microphone is doing its own thing a little bit. I'm 21 years old. I've been working at Torrid for the last 4 years, and my main drive is promoting self-growth and helping people find their inner beauty and helping to bring it outward. It's really nice to meet all of y'all.
Nice to meet you, Kenzie. Jim.
Hey, Todd. So my name is Jim Fisher. I'm 44 years old, so one of the older people here. I currently work as a director of philanthropy for a nonprofit in New Orleans, First Tee, which is a youth golf development organization for underserved kids. But I also work for the last 5 years as a personal trainer. My connection to Shrek and the issues that we're going to be talking about today is that I used to weigh 350 pounds, 10 years ago, and through grit and hard work and a few divorces, I was able to lose a few hundred pounds and kind of change the image I had of myself, and just learning to be happy with who I was. I'm now married for a third time and a father of two.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Whitney.
Hi, I'm Whitney Stewart, and I am a children's book writer and have been for over 30 years. One of the main lines of writing that I do, mostly nonfiction for kids, but I have written 9 different books or cards on mindfulness for kids because I believe in the importance of helping and encouraging kids with self-acceptance and understanding and self-calming and self-care. So that's my connection here. And my interest in, I also teach mindfulness to kids in classes, and my connection to that goes way back to my own childhood, which I'm sure we can have a time to talk about later.
Okay.
Okay.
Ramona.
Hi, everybody. It's really fabulous to be in the panel with all of you. I'm looking forward to hearing all of what you have to say. I'm in my 4th decade of life. I'm not going to give you the year. I've worked with children ever since leaving college at the University of New Orleans. And I work currently with CASA, which is Court Appointed Special Advocate. It's a volunteer agency that works on behalf of children. We want to make sure that every child has a safe and permanent home, and that self-esteem, self-awareness, self-love first starts in the home. And if you come from traumatic backgrounds and that is infused in you, is very difficult. There's a lot I can get into at the moment, but we'll save all of that for later. But I'm looking forward to what we have to talk about. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ramona. Baylee.
Hello, everyone. My name is Baylee Patterson. I am 20 years old, and I am a junior public health major with a concentration in health sciences at Dillard University. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I am from Cleveland, Ohio, so I'm not from here. But in relation to the topic today, I currently serve as the president of an organization on campus here called Curvy Girlz, which is an organization that promotes body positivity of women of all shapes and sizes on Dillard University campus. We basically just create a safe space for the women here through different events and different fun things that we do together. So I'm excited to hear what we all have to say.
Thank you, Baylee. Topher.
Hi, everyone. My name is Topher Bordenave. I'm from New Orleans, and I spent most of my career as a teacher and as an educator, ended my career in education as a principal. When I left principalship, I decided to be a mentor with Son of a Saint. I've been there for the past 4 years. Son of a Saint, for those of you who are not familiar, is a nonprofit organization for fatherless boys. So either their fathers are incarcerated, they have passed away, or they have just been 100% absent from their lives. Currently, I serve as a lead mentor. And so through this job, I interview mentors and then try to keep them engaged within the whole process and try to get them paired up as quickly as possible so the kids can fill the void of not having a father in their homes. Excited to be here. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Topher. Well, the reason why we're discussing this today is, the show we're coming up is called Shrek. And the play is largely basically the same as the first movie. It's a very fun-loving movie, but the crux of the play is about Shrek, who has been teased and bullied his entire life as being a big, large green ogre, finally gives up on humanity and leaves. And he finds himself in a swamp and lives there alone to keep away from people hurting him. And then he ends up getting in a situation with the princess, who he just knows can never love him for him. And this opened up the topic for all of our shows. What we're trying to do is connect our shows to something in the community. And how can a show that may have nothing to do with anything but fun and dance and singing, but how can it really be useful? And this show, I think, is very important to be talking about body positivity, which is a big issue today, and it's becoming more common whenever you read, to go to the extreme, whenever you hear things about young kids, like young teens who are committing suicide because of being bullied because they're other. And so I want to just start the topic. What is other? Anything, I guess, could be other. Does anybody feel like throughout their whole life that they never had anything they didn't want to change? So I guess everybody could fit into that boat, couldn't they?
Yeah, I think I can speak to this a little bit, just having undergone a pretty massive personal transformation of myself, and then seeing a lot of other people and working with people, and including kids who are kind of trying to work on themselves. I think one common misconception is that, if you look the way you want to look, and kids face this a lot, that if you look the way you want to look, that suddenly everything else kind of falls into place. And I think that's one of the things that really is very difficult, is that once you can fix everything you want about yourself, but it doesn't change anything that's going on inside your head. And so I think everybody is constantly evolving and changing and having to work on that and accept that there's something about them that they probably want to fix, or maybe they even don't. And it's just, they have to find their right group. But I have yet to meet a human being and they could be a perfect 10 on the outside, or a perfect 10 from the concepts of societal norms, that don't have something that they want to work on. Whether they say it out loud or not, that's a whole different issue. But I think everybody's got something that they're struggling with. And often I think people that look the most put together are the ones that are struggling the most inside.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, Jim. And for me, it's become a lot closer to home in our young people. I have 2 teenage daughters, and in the staff in which I work, one of our coworkers, her daughter was recently hospitalized for suicide, and she had body issues. And she asked her mom, what does it look to be? She started talking about her sexuality, and how that interfered with her life, with her friends. This child is 13. And then another friend of mine, this is within the last 3 months, 2 friends had their daughters hospitalized because they didn't like the way they looked. The bullying or just the self-awareness was just too close to home. And we're trying to wrap our brain around why are more of our kids actually experiencing this.
To piggyback off of her, I really think that social media plays a major role today in what they consider the perfect body or the perfect image to be. So it's hard to consider other as being the designated thing today, because social media just portrays women and men in a way that is basically perfect, but it's not perfect in everyone's eyes and what we see every day, because that's not something that we see every day. What you see on a day-to-day basis is what should be considered normalized and not what you see on social media.
I agree.
I wanted to jump in there because I'm really hit on what you two what you three just said, excuse me. I think I may be the oldest of the group, and I was just going to say that concern about body type was a really huge issue when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s. And yet we didn't have this social media, and we didn't have a discussion about it or anything. So it was much more hidden and quiet. And if you suffered, as I did, you suffered silently and alone and didn't know where to go to discuss it. I'm not saying that's any worse or better. In fact, I do agree with you. It seems to me more prevalent now, I think, because of the social media. It was just different. It was different in earlier decades.
You were going to say something, Kenzie?
Oh, yeah, I agree with everything that everyone just said. I think that we as a society just need to do better as far as encouraging our youth and encouraging each other to know that in your own eyes, you have to be kinder to yourself. You can walk down the street and, you compliment a person on their smile, and that same person will then look at themselves or obsess over a picture and say, oh, it's not perfect. I have to put some kind of filter over it. And I see it so often at my job. I have women who have figures I would kill for come and poke out, oh, I have these rolls, or I have these hip dips, or you don't see this double chin here. And I'm just like, you're beautiful. And it's sad to say that the society that we live in is not built for what humans actually look like. It's not even built for the models that they present to everyone. Because if you're too skinny, you're suddenly unhealthy. If you're plus size, you're suddenly too big and you're unattractive. And it's terrible, and it's affecting our youth these days. And how do you tell somebody that they're beautiful when it takes a million times of complimenting someone on one thing to get rid of this one bad thought or this one bad idea that they've heard from a friend or a family member or social media, when social media plays such a big role in our lives?
I think if you guys can imagine, like, coming from high school setting in New Orleans, the thing is, like, ain't nobody gonna play with me, or they playing with me too much, or what have you. And so it turns from, like, the jovial aspect of it to then, like, everyone's trying to, like, the deeper dig in effort to just hurt your feelings even more. And even that I'm thinking about positioning about games do, it just never ends. And I think that there are a lot of people, I'm a person, I don't tell very many people that, but on the outside, I can be very intimidating. I feel like the kitchen's only going to stop. And especially if you have you feel vulnerable with someone, we can, like, use that as vengeance towards you. That could be tough for kids to swallow.
We've discussed how it's particularly weight as being something that people struggle with, but what other kinds of acceptance issues have you run into? I mean, I know people who've had something like red hair, and they are not acceptable. I had a friend in school who had lots of freckles, and everybody was vicious to him about that. He hated his freckles, but there's nothing he could do about it. I mean, what other kind of circumstances when it comes to self-acceptance? I would think there's a lot of different things other than just weight.
And you're absolutely, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say he's absolutely right. I mentioned this before, not here, but in a different setting. My hair, as I was growing up, this is nappy hair, right? You do this. You don't walk around with locks, you know? And I remember thinking in my 20s and stuff, I'm a huge Bob Marley fan. And I was like, oh, I want my hair to look like that. And I remember my mom is, oh no, you can't have your hair like that. You have to perm your hair, relax your hair, straighten your hair. And that just sat with me so long. And I was like, okay, when I'm 50, I'm gonna lock, I'm not 50 yet, by the way. I was like, when I'm 50, I'm gonna lock my hair. And then one day I woke up and said, and this was before I made 40, I said, I'm going to lock it, and whoever doesn't like it can shove it. I don't care. It's just, and I never loved myself more now than before, trying to please what was other people's view of what was pretty. And when you come into just knowing who you are, and then my mom, after a while, she gave in. She was like, oh, your hair is nice. And all of a sudden now she wants to be natural, right? And she was saying that. But still, it's just feeling like I couldn't even choose my own hair. I mean, why did I feel like that? You know, that pressure, and then doing it and feel such a sense of freedom. It was defining.
I'll tell you that when I was a teenager, I despised my straight hair. I wanted curly hair. And I hated it being brown too.
What's funny, Todd, is I have really curly hair. You can see it. You can't tell right now because it's so short. I hate my curly hair. But I would say one thing that's interesting, and I found this not only in my own high school experience, but I have a son who's 15 years old, and he's different. Kids are incredibly cruel sometimes, and even in adults too. And people will zero in, I think, on even your belief system or what you like and what you don't like and how much money you have. It's interesting. Sometimes we've almost kind of created a world where somebody is going to find your weakness and find your button, and then they're going to press it. And it takes a lot of self-reflection, and I think inner strength and belief in yourself, and having good people around you to kind of overcome that. And I think that's for most adults and most kids. Just because you could walk outside and, you know, we live in basically a 50-50 world, for lack of a better term. And if you're in the wrong color state, or you like the wrong thing, I love sci-fi, I get made fun of for that. All of a sudden, you know, you're subject to ridicule. There's two of us over 40 in this room, or more than two of us, but you know, you get made fun of for your age. I work in a workplace where I'm the oldest one by far, and that's an issue too. So I think what is too bad is that instead of finding the things in ourselves that should be celebrated, and celebrated our differences, and we talk about that all the time, but we never do it. People zero in on what makes you different, and then they push and they push. And you know, I think as an adult, it's easier to overcome because we have experience and structure. Children, I'm not even sure how they make it these days, which is why I think discussions like this are so important.
I think for me, like being Creole and moving away for college and doing education in Memphis and then in Chicago, and then moving back, I was really looking forward to like having a space where like people looked like me and my own people would accept me for being Black. Because it was always like, you're not dark enough, you have green eyes, there's no way you're Black, you don't talk Black, you don't look Black, you know, all those types of things. And for me, like, even as an adult, they were like really trips me up. I moved back 4 years ago and people, you know, tell me things. I'm like, wait, what? And the funny part about it, it's the people who have a lighter skin as I do. I'm like, wait, I think I'm actually darker than you. How are you gonna tell me that I'm not Black, you know? So that is something that like I have an infinity to, especially when it comes to like bullying, is just color within our own race that like really, really gets to me. And like, I just hate that like people feel that like one isn't good enough than the other based upon like skin.
Just to piggyback off of what Topher said, because that's something I honestly went through elementary school, middle school, even high school. People definitely question my race. Like, I'm African American, but they see my light skinness, they see my eyes, and they're like, it's no way you're Black. I'm like, you're crazy. Like I see my parents every day. Like I see their color and I know what I am. So honestly, coming to a HBCU and being around people who are all different shades of Black, it's just amazing to see like I could be accepted for who I truly am.
Now, didn't Baylee, you say you're from Cincinnati?
Cleveland.
Cleveland, okay. I wonder, do you think it was more stark in Cleveland than it would be here? Because there are so many different, particularly like Topher was talking about, with so many Creole people here, you think it would have been different down here in New Orleans?
I'm honestly not sure.
Mhm.
They're more accepting down here because, you know, it's just so many different shades. Back home, it was really just people of darker color and not really just people. I didn't see many people of like my shade and my complexion back home.
Wow. So there's something I never thought about, that somebody would pick that to pick on you about.
Yeah, it was very like small remarks, like especially during Black History Month and stuff like that. Like it would hurt me, but you know, I just had to put a game face on and push through it.
Wow. You were going to say something, Kenzie?
Just to piggyback off of what y'all said, hearing what you went through, I realized that I have somewhat of the opposite problem. I go somewhere and I realize that people do not know enough about African Americans to kind of understand the struggle what we go through. Like I used to go to sleepovers when I was younger and I felt weird. I was the only kid that had to wear a bonnet. Nobody knew what it was. They would poke at it, pick at it, try to rip it off my head. Like, what is this? I don't understand this. And trying to explain it to them was strange for me because I'd never had to have the discussion about my hair. And it got to the point where I told my mom I didn't want my natural hair. I wanted it to be relaxed. I wanted it to look different. I wanted to be something like everyone else. I got braids one time when I had my relaxer. It came out and all of a sudden my straight hair was gone and I cried for 2 weeks because I didn't like how I looked. And then I got older and I started discovering myself and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try embracing my roots and I'm going to do more with my hair. It was going well. And then I went to California and it was somewhat of a culture shock. It was the first time I'd ever experienced what you hear every other Black person talk about on the internet. Oh, somebody reached out and grabbed my hair, or oh, somebody reached out and just touched me. I did not know what to do in that situation. And I feel like if it were more talked about, if we opened up the conversation a little bit more to help the understanding, I feel like maybe it would be a little bit easier to kind of make our way through society as it is now.
I'm sorry, Kenzie. In my 40ish, please explain that. What does reach out and touch my hair and all that? What does that mean?
So I had braids in when I went to California, and this lady just came up from nowhere behind me and just ran her hand straight through my braids. And she was like, "Oh, your hair is so pretty." And I understood she meant nothing by it, but it was just the fact that you felt comfortable enough to come up to me out of nowhere and just run your hands through my hair as though I'm someone that you're familiar with or somebody that you know. And to myself, I'm like, at the very least, you could have asked me and said, "Hey, I really like your hair. Would you mind if I were to touch it? Or if I could ask questions about it before, just feeling comfortable in touching."
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And well, actually, a minute ago, Whitney talked about this. Do you think, if you can look over the past 50 years, do you think that the things that people have issues with accepting in themselves have changed over the past 50 years? Somebody mentioned the internet. Do you like socially things like sexuality? 50 years ago, if somebody was a teen who was trans, I don't know how they would have dealt with that at all. They probably wouldn't have. Even people who had with their own sexuality was hard to deal with 50 years ago. Whereas today, it seems to be a little bit more. Seems to be. I am past my 40s. I will say that, and so I haven't dealt with being a teen for a very long time. But I don't know, do you think that generationally we have a couple of younger people here and a couple of older people to say, how do we think that it's changed over the decades?
I'm going to jump in here because I'm pretty sure I'm older than most of you by a long shot. I'm 63. So what I would say is I doubt what we're upset about, or what's hard for us if we're talking about physicality. But I want to get bigger than that too, is also behaviors. I think Jim maybe touched on this, or maybe it was Topher. Also, for example, if you're introverted or if you're extroverted, or if you like to read versus whatever the going thing is, and you don't like it. So it's behaviors too. I doubt that there's. Well, let's go back to thinking about our body or our hair. I bet you people feel the same kind of way back when I was growing up. But now there's so much more emphasis on it. There's so much more bullying on it because people can bully online. Your world is so much more expanded, because before it was with your community and your school, and it was relatively small. But now your world can be as large as you want it to be if you want to really put it out there. So bullying and negative feedback can come from a wider audience, which in my mind, in my perspective, I don't know, is that harder because there's more of it, or is it just as hard because, just let's say if one of your friends or somebody you thought was a friend criticize you. My own father I was very, very athletic and still am, and I had big, strong, muscular thighs. My own father used to say, you thunder thighs. He called me thunder thighs. And back then, when everybody wanted to be Twiggy, a model, for those who don't know, a model who was quite thin. Sorry, I just lost my light. I think the pain is the same. I think maybe some of the issues are the same. Maybe it's harder now just because it's so much bigger. But I think the issues are the same about body type and what we stress over.
I can only go back to the 80s growing up and the early 90s, but I think what is a lot different now. I'm not sure the issues are different. Obviously, the world is much smaller. I think for kids in particular, there's no escape anymore. I think some kids were lucky enough to grow up in a house where it was a safe space. That obviously that's not the case for everyone. It wasn't the case for me. But they could go home and escape, or they could go into their community and escape, and they would have at least one place where they felt comfortable. I think now for kids, there's not a lot of room anymore. And so if they're different in some way, they don't get any help at school. They may not be getting any help at home, which is unfortunate and it's hard to control. And then, certainly they click on the phone and there's 1,000 different avenues telling them how different and wrong they are. And they're getting ridiculed by nameless, faceless people, which in some way hurts even more. So I think the issues are probably the same, but there's just way less room for kids to find a safe space to be themselves now. And so I think that might be the issue.
Jim, can I ask you, do you really think that they're not finding help in school? Is that because, from my perspective as a children's book writer, there's so much more on social emotional learning, and I go into schools and I'm invited a lot more than I was before now. But I'm not in schools all the time, so I don't know.
I think, and this is just my own anecdotal, I have a teenager, I have a 6-year-old daughter too. And then, my organization works with kids, so I coach a lot of children. I think it's not that it's not available. I think it's incredibly difficult to put your hand up and ask for help. So unless the issue is so glaring that an adult is going to get involved, I think it's incredibly difficult for a child to have the self-awareness to say, I need help. And I mean, that's hard. That's hard for adults to say you need help. That's one of the hardest things to do, is to say that something's wrong. And that's for grown people with mature minds and experience and everything to back them. So I think for children, they get really good at hiding how much they're hurting. And so parents and teachers were just not equipped to get that involved because there's just too much going on. And so I think the schools do a commendable job of trying to get involved now. I mean, there's certainly programs now that when you and I were kids didn't exist, and that catches some of them, but I still think there's a lot that slip through the cracks, and they just suffer and nobody knows. Because every time we hear about a kid who was suffering and then they snap or something happens, we always are kind of sitting here pulling our hair out like, well, why didn't we see the warning signs? Obviously this child was in crisis and we missed it. And I think, for every one that we find or every one that snaps, there's hundreds that we're just not seeing. And there's not a lot of great avenues to get through to them to say like, yeah, put your hand up and say like, you need some help, because we can. I think that's, at least now, I think there's a shot at helping them, whereas maybe 20 years ago or 40 or 50 years ago, there was just no shot.
Jim, I also think that has to do a lot with trust.
Yeah.
And I think to Whitney's point, like, I do think that it's more readily available. However, it just depends if like kids are actually willing to be vulnerable with those people who are there to help. And Whitney, to your point, I'm wondering like if, I think it's becoming more prevalent now because, I'm thinking about my mom has 7 brothers and they used to fight all the time. If one fought, they all fought. And then would end and like the next they'll be friends. And as we know, like society as it is now is not just a fist fight and it's over and done with. And coming from like schools, like I had to put moms in chokeholds, grandmas wrestling the aunts to the ground because they're trying to beat up they niece or nephew. It gets to be like a lot. And it doesn't, unfortunately, in our community, it doesn't end until like something seriously goes down. And I think then it gets on, they put it on social media and then it gets on the news. And I just feel like it's just more exposed. But I feel like all these things have been happening for a long time. I think that we deal with it different ways.
I want to say that I agree with Jim and Topher on what y'all put out there, but in a different spin of things that I've been having this conversation with my peers and my friends, children to me seem softer. I'm in my 40s, like I said, we've been talking about this age thing for a minute, but we were bullied, we were chastised. I mean, as a kid, I got called Charlie Brownhead. They used to call me Chinese girl because my eyes were slanted, just all kinds of things, but never to a point where I've seen kids, I mean, literally like, oh, I'm having an anxiety attack, I'm having a panic attack, I can't go to school today because it's raining. I mean, the littlest things, I don't feel like now kids are as strong and as prepared to deal with, say, hatred or dislike as we were. I mean, that was just, if somebody did something to you or whatever, it was easier to kind of roll that off your back. Not that it didn't affect you, I'm not saying that at all, because it did, but it never even crossed my mind to say, oh, I'm going to take these pills and kill myself. That just was never a thought. So when I'm hearing from kids today, literally just wants to go die, that's just horrifying to me. It's like, how do we get there? And I know it sounds a little rough, but I just feel like the helicopter moms and we're overprotecting, and you know where I'm going with this. So I just want to hear what y'all have to say.
Listen, I don't disagree with you by any means. I coach club volleyball girls and they like, you can't come to practice. Why? It could be like the smallest things, but I was raised like, you tough it up and you keep it moving. Like it's gonna happen. Go ahead. Staying home for what? No, you're gonna get up and go to school. You know what I'm saying? And I think that like I do agree with you. I do agree with you. I feel you. Because that's definitely a thing as well.
Yeah, I think, the game we work with, golf, is incredibly hard and frustrating. So a lot of what we teach is kind of like coping mechanisms on how to calm down and kind of get through things. And I agree with you. I mean, sometimes I look at my own kids and I'm like, man, you just got to toughen up, Buttercup. We got to go. I feel like it's society tends to swing like all in one direction or all in the other, when the reality is we have to kind of find that balance. And I feel like a lot of the conversations that people are having now is trying to find balance on, well, how can we make sure that we're catching the kids that need help, but also saying like, hey, life's not fair. Sometimes, you do something right and it still goes wrong. And that's just, learning how to deal with failure, I think is an incredibly important skill for kids to learn. I know in my own life, I failed more times than I've been successful, and learning how to overcome that has been incredibly useful. I know Son of a Saint does a lot of that kind of work. We work with Son of a Saint at First Tee. And I feel like that's where, mentors and coaches and school systems, can help kids and just kind of say like, yeah, you're going to fail. Like, that's just part of it. Or, yeah, it's not always fair. And here's how you start to overcome that. I think that, along with being sensitive on the appropriate topics, it's a balancing act. I think that's the most difficult thing, is trying to figure out, like, is this kid pulling my leg, or are they really in trouble? I'm not qualified to make that answer. But I think that's probably one of the toughest things to figure out, is when is this just like not a big deal, and when is this like, man, they're really trying to reach out,
I think constant pouring into a child, reiterating their talents, just pouring into them constantly helps build them up to a point where they can overachieve in different talents that they do have. At the same token, toughening them up for when stuff does happen to them so they can overcome it. Yeah.
Ramona, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, so I teach kids mindfulness, and some of the techniques of mindfulness are really about self-acceptance and just being okay with how you are feeling, your emotions, your thoughts, your behaviors at this moment. And he's like, okay, well, this is the way it is, here I am. Now, I'm not saying that leaves it there. For me, self-acceptance is just that first step for if you want to change something. But am I giving them I'm just wondering, after what you just said, which is very interesting to me, am I helping them be too soft? Or, should I, or where does the toughness part balance with encouraging self-acceptance?
And thank you. And I'm not ever saying that I have every answer in the world, but for example, with my daughter, who had a lot of trauma growing up, and when she's angry, I accept her anger. I don't tell her she's bad for it or anything like that. Even if she's, really going off the handle. Like, I tell her she give you 30 seconds. I even give you a full minute to feel that. But I need her to learn emotional control. Like, I know you have these emotions. They fluctuate throughout the whole day, right? Especially women, especially menopause. But when you have a a child who's experiencing these emotions and they haven't been taught how to deal with them, they need to be taught how to deal with them. So if you're there teaching them how to accept their feelings and knowing that they determine the temperature of their feelings, that's very important. That's very valuable. So when they know that, oh, this person has made me angry because they said my forehead was big today, that's okay. Have that emotion, feel that emotion, now choose what's next. Are you going to be happy in the next moment? Or are you going to continue to be angry or want to get even with that person for what they did? Or are you going to continue to be sad behind something that happened 10 years ago or 5 minutes ago? What is your choice now? So to me, what you're doing is helping them harness what they know, harness those feelings and abilities, and make choices not to live in those negative emotions, and then how to change them to work out so they can continue their day, continue to be who they are.
All right, so ask Kenzie or Baylee if you want to jump in on this.
I can jump in. Hearing y'all speak about your experiences, I realize there is a definite difference in the generations, even me, somewhere caught in the middle between the new generation and the older one. In my generation, I feel like growing up, it was harder to talk about emotions, not as hard as y'all may have had it, but with us, we just kind of learned to bottle it up a little bit better. And then that's why people will make us the strong friends, or I can come to you whenever I have this issue, or I need advice or something else. And we just sit on it, sit on it, sit on it until it explodes. And then we have to figure out again how to deal with those emotions. And now I'm older and I've learned how to better control those emotions and how to be kinder to myself and say, you know what? It's okay to go through those feelings, those emotions, to say, I need help, or tell my mother, hey, I need therapy for this situation that I may not have told you about. It may have happened 5-10 years ago, but it still may affect me on some level. And when we talk about development in children, I don't think we focus enough on teenagers because those emotions do grow, they do fester. And I have a girl now that I help to mentor. And a lot of what she tells me is social media based because it gives people a sense of being anonymous, because now you can have all these accounts, everybody has 16 emails. Your friend may not really be your friend. They might be talking about you under a different name on social media. And it just creates a lot more trust issues as far as, people go.
You know what I find really interesting, kind of going with Whitney and Ramona saying is, like, it's funny how these days you motivate kids get motivated by how they make you feel as an adult. So like, it'll be like, for example, I was able to manipulate a lot of kids to be like, hey, I need for you to go back in class and be good and listen to the teacher. Can you do that for me? Or as I feel like when I was growing up, it's like, they're gonna do that because that's what I said. But really we should be teaching kids, no, do this for yourself because this is what's the right thing to do. And I don't know that, like, I'm speaking for high school kids from my experience, that they really have like enough self-worth to even be like, you know what, I'm gonna do this for myself because my life and my future matters. They're doing it just to please and appease other people because that's what they feel like they have to do. And which is really terrible. And I was definitely playing into it because I didn't know what else to do. But I mean, if they trust you and they like you, they're gonna do it for you. But at some point, how are we training them to like change and alter the way they're like feeling, acting, etc., for themselves and not for other people?
To kind of go off of Topher's point, what I think is interesting, because we've spent a lot of time talking about kids, is that as a person that's managed a lot of people in my life, these things fester into adulthood, and these become issues for adults, so as we're talking about how do kids deal with this, it's incredibly hard for kids, but I've dealt with adults who are in their 50s who I've been their manager and trying to motivate them, and had to kind of sit there and work through all these things that have been festering with them for 30 years because they spent 30 years trying to please someone else instead of trying to do something for themselves or trying to be their authentic self. So these things don't stop with kids. They go into people's 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. And the issues don't go away just because, we get a bank account and a credit card and we have a job now, or a family, So I think that's something that's worth exploring too. I mean, if you could nip it in the bud early, it's great. But I know in my own personal experience, it wasn't until my mid to late 30s until I started to even figure out just a little bit of what I needed to figure out to become just a better person, and be aware of who I was and how I was, helping other people and affecting other people. And so I think, I think it's worth a discussion because adults are dealing with this too. And then they're giving those same issues over to their kids. And it's just that, I mean, we hear that all the time. It's a vicious cycle, but it really is. So it's hard. It would be hard for a 50-year-old to deal with this, let alone a 16-year-old or an 8-year-old, or a 25-year-old. I think that's what's interesting. Like all these things we could say, you could say like, yeah, I know a 40-year-old that's going through this, or I know a 25-year-old that's going through this. And they're having the exact same problem, except now we've thrown, adulthood on top of it.
You hitting, Ramona?
I just was going to say he hit the nail on the head, because as Whitney was saying, we have to teach them all of this as youth. So when they go into adulthood, they don't have that as huge of an issue, because you're still going to have that. That's just being human. You're still going to go through that. But once you're taught it and you know how to manage it, you can get through it a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Kenzie?
I agree. I think that it's a balance thing as well. I feel like every generation tries to take what they didn't like from their parents and say, you know what, I'm not going to be like that when I get older. And even with my mom, there are things that she has from her mom that she said, you know what, I'm not going to do this. And there are things I find from her, I say, I'm not going to do it. And I think that one of the major things that we carry through our generation is that kids back then were seen and not heard. So you had these feelings inside that you were forced to kind of keep to yourself, because you're saying, oh, my mom's an adult, my grandma's an adult, they're an elder, obviously, they must know more than me, or these feelings aren't okay because I'm a kid, I can't voice them. And so my mom's tried to teach me to be an adult that says, you know what, age has nothing to do with it. Disrespect is disrespect, but there is a way to voice that in those feelings without being disrespectful. Mm-hmm. And I think when I become a parent, I would like to teach my child the same thing, but also there's that balance, because how do I tell you, okay, disrespect is disrespect, and there's a way to voice that without letting you feel like, okay, I'm going to be too loose-lipped and I'm going to go off on every single person I meet,
And we started a little bit with Jim. To go the next step, how do people gain self-acceptance for themselves? How do they get through that? Whether they're 10 or if they're 50.
I think part of it is recognizing that everybody is a little different in some way. I know for me, I was 33. I was a few hundred pounds overweight. I was going through my second divorce at 33, which, one divorce is a lot. Two, they start to look at you funny. I had a child from my first marriage. My wife had cheated on me. So that was an extra piece of trauma that I had to kind of deal with myself. And I've always kind of talked about this openly. And so I was in an incredibly hurt place. I didn't like my profession, even though I was pretty good at it, I think. And so I started, and I went to therapy for, a few months, and I started to slowly kind of realize that I could piece my life back together in a way that I wanted it to be. And one of the things that I told myself was that as I started to rebuild my life, that I was never going to tolerate someone that wouldn't accept me for who I was. And that's not like, and I'm not saying like it's okay to be a jerk sometimes, but that somebody wouldn't accept me as a core, but as a human being. If somebody didn't like that, I wasn't going to change that. I would just find someone else. And that served me really well. And that as I grew not only into my body, but into a much more mature mind, I started to say like, yeah, well, even though I'm making money at this job, it's not worth compromising who I am to do a job just because I'm good at it and I make money. That's no longer okay. And so I left that job and got another job where I made half as much money, but was much happier. And because I had surrounded myself with people who were accepting of who I was, a lot of people, you go to your spouse and you're like, hey, I'm taking a personal training internship for no money versus turning down a 6-figure a year job. They would call you crazy and they would divorce you for that, right? Or it would certainly be a fight and you would take the job. My wife said, well, of course that's what we're going to do, because we're not going to let you compromise who you are, and we're not going to compromise who we are as a family because of money. And so I think that was part of it, was that knowing that there's a tribe of people out there who, no matter who you are, that believe the things that you believe, as long as they're good things, you have to go find them, and that requires constant work and diligence. And that once you do that, that's something that can set you up for a lifetime of feeling much more fulfilled. And then just knowing that it's an evolving process. You know, there's going to be ups and downs and slips and falls, but ultimately that if you stick to those core principles, you're going to be better off for it. And so whenever I talk to people about how I did it, I always start with, I accepted who I was, and that working at this was going to be work. And I treated it like a job. And I never wavered from my plan and my mission once I found the right one. And that kind of sets you up. And I feel like if people kind of approached it that way, it's funny, at work, you'll never compromise, right? If your boss says do something, you do it. But we compromise in our lives all the time. And so I just took those work principles and I applied them to my life, and it made my life better and more fulfilling than I ever thought it could be. Like if you had talked to me 15 years ago and said that I would be having a conversation about this now in my current life, I would tell you you're insane. And so I think that takes a lot of work on yourself, and being happy with yourself before other people can start accepting you.
Jim, I 100% agree. And Todd, unfortunately, like, it just comes with maturity.
Yeah.
You know, like, and the like wanting to, but I mean, I would agree with Jim. Like I, was a principal, went to school for it, did it for 16 years. And then I took a year off to try to like mentally reset my mind, body, and soul. And then realized, oh, I'm good at interior design. Let's just do that. But if it wasn't for the people behind me, because I had a lot of self-doubt and people behind me saying like, you can do it, you got it, you're good at it, blah, 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 like all those things. Yeah, that's really good and great. But like you have to have and find those people. And I'm not sure like how to like advise or to coach kids to find those people. Or like you said, Todd, to like that it's like the right people that are like in your corner to getting you to do the right things to help you accomplish your goals and, do what you need to do to just become a better person.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that, mentorship is incredibly powerful. And that's for adults. My dad wasn't a big part of my life. And so I had an older friend who died recently, and I was telling his widow the other day that, I spent a good chunk of my life because I didn't have a great dad, looking for great dads to fill that void. And that her husband had meant so much to me because of what I learned from him, and I looked up to him. And I feel like for adults, that if you have a good mentor and you can find that person that you really trust, that they pour into you, it gives you perspective, and it really helps you kind of try to find the right folks in your life. A friend told me once, you're the 8 people you hang around the most. And if you don't like your life, take a look around you and change those people. And, if more people did that, I think we would probably be in a better place.
Mm.
What I'm hearing, and it goes back to, again, is finding self-acceptance and confidence in that self-acceptance. Going back to my childhood, I was in a very abusive household. I was the only one of 5 who was sober, and I was physically and sexually and emotionally abused. So I tried to get out as quickly as I could. By 17, I was gone. But what I came out from that is I had no self-worth. I thought I was just a piece of dirt. And so I kept choosing boyfriends who would treat me the same way I was treated in my childhood. And it took maybe the last straw of an abusive boyfriend for me to finally wake up. And it wasn't until my 20s that I woke up and said, I have to make a choice now. I have to find a way to, heal myself. And, obviously it wasn't quite so coherent. It took years. But again, it was beginning to accept myself and also see that, wait a minute, those family members, their behavior is what shaped me, and my response to their behavior, I would say, but it wasn't me. And it took me a very, very long time to realize, wait, that wasn't me. And I can live a life. I can accept myself. I'm not a little small piece of dirt that is only worth being around somebody who's going to abuse me. But it took a very, very, very long time. And I've always hoped that to be able to work with kids, many of whom also come from abusive households, to help them find their self-confidence at an early age, so it's not so late. It's not in, in my case, I would say it's really more in my 30s that I really began to trust who I am. I don't know if it's somebody else, maybe some of you younger ones could speak to that.
I would personally definitely say that self-acceptance is a journey. And I do believe that it's a journey that really you never fully end. Because it's always something you want to change. Like you can never just feel too comfortable in one spot. It's always something that you could do better at, you could critique. Or like Jim said, like it's something that you don't want to pursue anymore and then you want to go an alternate route. It's always something different that you want to go into or dive deep into. And it's always something in yourself that you feel like I could do this better, or like I know I could do more. So definitely self-acceptance. I feel like you can never just be fully comfortable in one spot, but you could work towards it always and just feel, I don't know, what's the word? Feel safe where you are.
Baylee, where do you think your wisdom in this comes from? Have you always been this way?
Honestly, no. I probably started gaining more wisdom about this after high school and coming into college, because in high school I knew who I was, but I did go through like a lot of friendship drama, not a lot of family drama, because I've always had like the support of my family. But in friendships, I could definitely say that I didn't really know what type of friend I was or what type of friend I wanted to be. But learning this from my high school experiences and coming into college, I learned like the type of person, the type of friend, and the type of individual I wanted to be towards people and towards my community.
Kenzie?
For me, I started my self-acceptance journey with baby steps. I had to set smaller goals for myself in order to get to the bigger one, which was being more comfortable with my sexuality, with my weight, with my hair, with my roots. And like Baylee said, learning to find out what kind of friend that I am to other people. I decided that I would be the type of friend that I want to have. So I ended up being the positive one and the one with the broad outreach who can accept you through any and everything. But in doing that, I realized that I also have to keep that same amount of energy for myself if I wanted to be able to give anything to anyone else.
Yeah, I think for me, my name is Christopher, and I went to undergrad in Memphis. I taught there for a while, and then realized I just need to go to a big city. And so I realized at 23, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be Black, and when someone says anything negative about anyone being Black, I'm gonna say something, because oftentimes I didn't. And I'm also gonna be out, and I'm gonna be a Black gay man, just as Black and gay as I could be. And so I was like, I'm gonna move to the big city. So I went to Chicago, and I was like, you know what? I gotta rebrand myself as Topher. So yes, my family still calls me Chris, but I never introduced myself as Chris. If people are like, oh, I heard your mama call you Chris, I'm gonna say, no, nope, my name is Topher. Because it's a different, for me, it was just like, it's just a different person. Someone who was like shy and intimidated and not sure of himself. And I just got to be too much for me, like emotionally and personally. I think one thing I did wrong was I probably like overcompensated for like, so that was like very pro-Black and very like, get right to it got to be like a little too much. So I think now in my late 30s, I've like kind of like toned down, and I think I'm like really truly like now finding myself. But it was a matter of like wanting to like be comfortable in my own skin. It just took a really, really long time. And I think to Baylee's point, like we're never gonna be to that point where like we always feel 100% confident. I think we're gonna go through roller coasters and go through hurdles and whatnot. But I do feel that like you have to be willing, but you also have to know like who you are and what you want to be. Kind of like we guys saying, like the type of friend I want to be. But I feel like you also have to know like what type of person you want to be. And to Jim's point, like the mentor who you're looking up to be like that person, or to like have enough trust in that person to lead you down the right path is super hard to find and figure out. But I think, it's possible for sure.
Does anybody else, can anybody else speak to boundaries? For me, I had to realize, oh, I need to create some boundaries. I need to not let this person crush me. I don't know if anybody else can speak.
I think this is just me, my mom was never the best influence on me and one of my sisters. And I think oftentimes family is always, to me, the biggest hurt because you love them. Like it's just built in to the relationship, and society says that you're supposed to do everything for them no matter what. And I know that as I went through my journey and I realized that I was, being manipulated and that it wasn't healthy, I had to find a different family. And since then, some of those relationships have been repaired as much as they're going to be. But I just fiercely defended my turf in terms of who I wanted to be as a person. And that nothing was going to get in the way of that. And if it meant that we didn't talk anymore, okay, that's cool. I mean, that's a choice that you're making because I'm choosing to be this better version of myself. And so I think you have to plant your flag, and then be prepared for people to come along and try to take shots at it. Because what's weird, and I always found it weird, somebody asked me once, what was the hardest part about losing 200 pounds? And I said, what was interesting was that as I lost the weight, people around me tried to get me to break my diet and to not exercise and they would try to sabotage because misery, and they were like, well, why do you think that happened? I'm like, misery loves company. And people, they're weird and they're jealous and they have their own insecurities going on. And it's not personal. It's just, they're struggling with themselves and you have to know that. And so I think that as people, and it's different for everyone, as you find what is important to you and the people around you and the people that you choose to have in your life, you have to just defend that ground with everything in who you are, and that includes, like, if somebody breaks that trust, then okay, cool, you might give them another chance, but after that it's kind of over. And so I know in my own life, there are people I just don't talk to. It's just like, no, I'm not about that. That's not who I am, and I don't want to be associated with that. And so I think that takes a lot of courage because you get really comfortable with people. And it's very hard to go out and make a new family or new friends, or to find a new job. That I think that's difficult for anyone. So you just have to find your tribe and then defend them with everything you have. Like your life depends on it, because it does. You only get to do this once. You might as well be happy, right?
I personally believe that boundaries are okay. Like, it's certain people for certain things in your life. The same person doesn't have to be for the same thing. Like when it comes to family, when it comes to friends, when it comes to associates, not just one person is right for you. Well, in the social type of way and attributing to your life. So it's okay to put up boundaries when it comes to protecting your peace and protecting like yourself. And I've noticed that a lot through going through school.
Jim, I planted my flag first in my house.
That's an important place.
Signs, peace signs all over the place, so people know when they walk through the door, do not bring the drama here. So the boundaries, like you said, Whitney, everybody here is very important, instrumental to your mind too. If your environment is in chaos, it's going to be hard to avoid, right? So when you fix that, and then in your mind know that you're not going to have chaos, you just want to involve yourself in that. Stick to the word I like to use is harmony. If we're not about this harmony in my tribe, then you got to go. It comes to a place where it's just not worth it anymore. I mean, Jim, I could not have said it better myself. Everything you said, I fully believe and experienced, and just thank you for that. And I think it should be on billboards in around the city, just saying that to everybody. You know, life is already hard. Why make it worse? Why add to misery? You know what I'm saying? Find your happy place, move in that, and share that happy place with other people. It seems so simple, but yet we don't do that. You know, loving can be very easy if we take the drama out of it.
Yeah, I think you just get like caught up, you know, like this is a very, very minute example, but like to Jim's point, like I didn't even realize that I've started to do this, but my parents are divorced, they're both remarried. Thanksgiving, Christmas is always like, who's having dinner first? I'm having dinner at 3. Oh no, I'm having dinner at 3. Wait, you had dinner at 5 last year. And I'm in the midst of, so I told my parents this past Christmas, I said, look, I'm gonna move when I want to move. And don't get me caught up in no drama about what time is this one, how long I'm staying. And when I leave, don't give me no guilt trip about when I'm leaving. So I'm gonna come when I want to, I'm gonna leave when I want to. And that's it. And let me tell you, this past Christmas was amazing. Like I didn't deal with any drama and it was perfect. And I'm like, and now Jimmy had me thinking like, I need to start doing this with like, it's a very small, minute example, but like it created so much peace and harmony to my holiday season. I feel like Whitney, I feel like you're like gonna push me to be like more articulate in like how I need to set boundaries with people because it really does affect your peace.
It just makes me smile hearing you say that. Sorry, just a whole story of what you told your parents just makes me smile.
Yeah, I appreciate the push, and I'm gonna stick to it.
I think one thing that, I think one of the hardest things is to be yourself, right? You know, people say it all the time. When I used to coach radio talent, and I was program director, I'd always say, well, be yourself. You know, it's a better version of who you are. It sounds better. And it was always hard for talent to do that because if that self fails, it's like an indictment, like, oh my God, these people don't like me. And ratings are a very, it's a very numeric way to say like they like you or they don't, right? But I found in life, the hardest thing is to be yourself. Everyone says it all the time. But the hard thing about being yourself is, what if somebody doesn't like you? Or what if people shun you? Or what if it doesn't go well? And I think, for those of us who are kind of saying like we've kind of found our happy place, for lack of a better term, is that we all got very comfortable with being authentically who we are and being willing to say like, well, if you don't like it, that's okay, but this is who we are, and these are the people who are going to be in our room with us. And I think that takes a lot of courage. I think it's really hard for people to get to that place. I know for me it was hard, and it's not hard anymore because it's been so long, but initially it was terrifying. And part of that is just being willing to say like, yeah, this is hard and it's terrifying, but how many adults like to admit weakness? Nobody does, because they feel like you're weak. But to me, the sign of true strength is saying I need help and this is difficult, or that if you have a past and something happened to you, I think, somebody was talking about this, that, they had issues in their childhood and you used it as armor, because it made you who you were. And I know that was a big moment for me in my life, saying like all the things that I went through, some of them self-inflicted, some of them not, it made me who I was. And I use it like a badge of honor because I'm still here, and I'm still thriving and fighting. And so I think it's important for people to do that. And I think it shows a lot of courage and strength. And it's not traditional, but I think it's the strongest thing anyone can do.
I have a phrase for myself personally about how do I turn the test into a testimony? And it really is, I mean, your experiences are unique with yourself and you never know who you're going to be able to help. But, for me personally, I do know that whenever you're feeling an insecurity on something, you believe that everybody around you is perfect. Those who are casting judgment on you, they know they're the ones that are right. And it has to come to the point where you don't care if they're right or not. And that's a hard thing. And I didn't really come to that until I was 50. And come to the point that I don't really care what people think. And, people say this in my whole life, you don't have to care what people think. And, but I mean, on the boundaries, Whitney, and it was August of 2005 that I finally had a conversation with my mother and ended my relationship with her. And she was a toxic human. And I had a conversation, we were on the phone. It was not quite as calm and quiet as this is right now, but that was the last conversation we had. And she died about 8 years later of cancer. I never spoke to her again. Now, in hindsight, I know, and a little bit more mature than I am than then, that she was tormented as well. And the issues that she was dealing with, she was lashing out. And I think oftentimes, anybody I've seen who has been lashing out at somebody else is lashing out because of their own insecurities. That's how they make themselves feel better. So somebody's saying, why can't these people just be nice to each other? Well, they're fighting for their own survival. And so when you see these people that are hurting other people, they're doing it just because they see what they hate in themselves and other people, I believe. Now, I don't know if we have any questions. Let's ask our wonderful Amy if Amy has any questions for us.
I haven't seen any questions on the chat, no,
Okay.
but I can provide questions if you'd like.
Do you have a question, Amy? That'd be lovely.
Well, there was a lot of discussion about trust and friendship, and that's the some of the quotes that I sent people about Donkey and Shrek were about friendship, and I do think that everybody's touched upon how to be a friend and how you choose your friends. There's something really interesting in Shrek, one of the quotes about accepting other people as friends and accepting love from other people. And I do think that's a journey too, is, how have you all, it's one thing to go through your own journey of acceptance, but, I know there's the imposter theory. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine about that with her career change that she's going through. So when you accept yourself, that's one thing, but other people's perceptions of you, good or bad, can also be difficult. So if you get to a point of success, which all of you here on this panel have, what does that feel like to accept your worth? Because that might be a change, right? And then accept people loving you and accept people. That's it. I'm just repeating myself. I think you know what I mean.
Who would like to jump in on that?
I guess I can jump in. Honestly, it feels great. I'm so happy that I have a great support system with people who support me. And I think it's important for people to know that just because somebody supports you doesn't mean that they have to necessarily accept everything that you're about, but still having that support group is amazing. I can't even put it into words how good it feels, because I don't have to hide who I am or how I feel, or I have these people to talk to. And I think it's also important to stress that these people might not even be in like your close circle of friends or your immediate family. Sometimes they're just people that you somehow met on accident and blossomed into the greatest thing ever.
I don't mind jumping in on this one. I think to accept love from someone else, you have to, it can't happen until you accept who you are, and you have to love yourself a little bit. I know that sounds pretty cliche. But you have to have some self-awareness about yourself and know things about yourself before you're willing to accept other people into your world. I know for me, it was a few years of kind of going through a process before I was finally able to accept, the love from another person in a healthy way. And that includes friends and partners and everything else. And then even at work, in my professional life, it was hard, because you're always evolving. I also think that one thing that I think is important for people is to be self-aware and to know that often, your greatest strengths can be your biggest weaknesses, and that they often work against each other. And I know for me, I still don't accept the fact that I've been successful at things. I still struggle with my body image, even though I work as a personal trainer in a gym and I don't weigh 350 pounds anymore. I still think I'm unsuccessful in my career, even though I've had a pretty interesting career. And that drives me to other things. So my drive is also my greatest weakness. My greatest strength is my greatest weakness. And that was a journey of self-awareness and constantly knowing, and then having people around you that can speak truth to you in a productive, loving way. But I think to be able to accept even a compliment from someone else, that I think that's hard. And to accept love from someone else, that's hard. And you have to have very honest conversations with those around you. I know that was a lot of it for me, was just learning how to accept those things and accept them for face value, because the back of your mind is always, oh, well, they don't really mean it. They're just saying it because they want something. And that's still a constant journey. You still battle those voices. They don't magically go away. I wish they did. Life would be easier. But I think somebody said it earlier, you learn how to manage and cope, and you learn good coping skills. And I would say that I'm an incomplete human being with incredible coping skills that I've learned over the years.
That's great.
Who's that next?
No, that's great. I think it is that was one of the quotes about Shrek and Donkey, and just Shrek accepting, Donkey's love for him is a big part of the movie. The other thing that I sent you with the quotes was about this idea that self-love under authoritarianism is another theme. And this idea that liking yourself is a rebellious act when we live in a society where, whether it is social media or it is the government or anything, there's a great quote in one of these articles that self-love is a form of power, that it might be the greatest form of power. So not to turn it totally political, but I mean, there was an essay written in this manner about the power of self-love in Shrek being, because he's fighting against this kingdom, and has his own, wave your freak flag moment, that, self-acceptance is a political act.
Have nobody grabbing onto that one.
I don't know. That's a little hard, because when Amy, when she sent that out and I was reading it, it just made me think about races that were shunned because of who they were. When you talk about the Jews and Hitler, when you talk about enslavement and how the politics shaped society to hate. And then it grew into self-hate amongst African-American people. Not knowing and not loving yourself, not even thinking that you're worthy, not thinking that your skin color had value. You actually wanted to be Baylee's color because you wanted to look more like what was acceptable. So you weren't loving yourself. I mean, that is so apparent even today. My two daughters, one is very dark, the other one is a golden brownish tone. And the one who's very dark does not, she's made comments about not liking herself. And I know that's from generational things that's happened over the years in the United States, and it's compounded so much. And it breaks my heart that I have to reiterate to my children how beautiful they are, no matter what shade they are, because of what we've gone through as a society. That shouldn't be, but it is. And other than just creating a balancing act or reiterating to them how beautiful they are for me, and then for them to accept who they are and love themselves despite what politics may say or what has driven down from that umbrella, to still have that self-love. It's very difficult to compound that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I heard once a quote when I was in high school that, what's right isn't always popular, and what's popular isn't always right. And I think that it's really hard in this climate if you believe what's like not in power right now or what's not the popular thing, to hold to your beliefs. You know, I remember having this conversation with my wife, you know, during the election last year, and with my son, who's, you know, was a very impressionable 14-year-old at the time. And even my daughter, and trying to explain to her that, you know, this is what our family believes. These are the things that we think are right. This is what we stand for, no matter what. This is who we are. And just trying to really reiterate that these were important things. You know, my wife is from Honduras. You know, my mom, you know, our family is from Mexico generations back, and my dad was a white guy. So I kind of grew up with that mixed background. And like like your kids, one of my son is very white from my first wife. You know, I'm not that dark, and my daughter is a beautiful brown color, cinnamon color. And you know, I hear it from her sometimes. You know, she's like, "Oh, well, you know, I don't like my brown skin," or you know, my skin. She'll sometimes say, like jokingly, like, "My skin's not brown," and we're like, "Well, wait a minute, no, it is, and it's beautiful, and you are gorgeous." And so I think it's just one more layer that makes things difficult. You know, and it's funny, maybe this just goes back to my own upbringing. I hear authoritarianism and loving yourself in that, and I'm like, yeah, parents are kind of like authoritarians. You know, we're dealing with that on a very micro level. Forget like what the government is doing. We've all been lucky enough to grow up in a place where you can, for the most part, believe what you want. So I think it's just one more thing that makes it more difficult, you know, and kudos to the people that can overcome it.
As we're coming to an end, I'd love for each of you to give a piece of advice to somebody out there who is struggling to accept themselves for whatever reason. And I'll leave it at that.
I have a thought. One of the ways I think I help others is by recognizing that if I have a judgment about others, that it came from something I was taught and something that I somehow believed, and that it's not about the other person, it's really about me, and it's about what I was taught and what I accepted. And I'm turning that around now and thinking that one, we can do that for others, is by questioning our own beliefs and judgments. And then, but also turning it around, recognizing that when somebody says something mean to us or something judgmental to us, that recognizing that they're doing the same thing. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just thought that maybe if we all understand our own judgmental mind, we'll begin to at least have a wisdom about how we all function this way. And maybe the way to change it is to examine our own judgmental mind. It's not going to change the behavior of somebody else. I can only control, we know this, I can only control what my own behavior, but at least it gives understanding a little bit, just an understanding of other behavior.
I think if I were going to tell anyone who is struggling or going through anything, especially when it comes to yourself, I would tell them that it's all worth it. You know, that it's not an easy journey. There's nothing easy about self-reflection. There's nothing easy about getting the right people around you. It is hard, and there's no magic pill, and it's work, and it takes a long time. I think, as evidenced by all of us who are talking today, it takes a long time, and it's an evolving process. But that at the end, if you can see the end, it's worth it. That all the work and all the doubt is worth it. You know, even on your worst day, I think all of us who have come through anything in our life can all sit here and say, everything we went through is worth it because my worst day is better than my best day back then. And that's all I would just remind them, was that it's hard, but it's worth it. and just keep that in mind.
I would say that the advice that I give them would be, don't be so hard on yourself, because it's gonna come. When you finally learn to accept yourself and love yourself for who you are, you're not gonna be in this situation. Just like Jim said, as long as you work towards it and want to be better, you're gonna get to where you need to be.
My advice,
Go ahead, Kenzie.
I'm sorry. My advice would be that boundaries are hard, loving yourself is hard, and figuring out how you recharge and de-stress and take time out of your day to do that. That way that you can give more of yourself to people and keep some energy for yourself, because you're going to need it.
Ditto to everything everybody said, and a practice for me on a daily is just positive affirmations, and believing in myself on a regular basis, repeating to myself over and over again that I can do that, and being a little selfish, throughout that process, and if no one else tells me, I'm going to tell myself how smart I am, that I am beautiful, that I am worthy, that I have value, that I matter, not only to myself, but to the people around me. So I'm not looking for it so much on the outside, but I'm gathering it from inside, putting in just recycling it within myself on a regular basis. And like Kenzie said, that energy, putting it back in there. So that's it.
Not to spark up another conversation, but in high school, when you said the word affirmations, it just kind of triggered me to this program I did when I was in high school that dealt with self-love and being who you are. We basically had to write at least 25 affirmations like once a week and say them to ourselves, even if it was a small or large affirmation. And it really helped me find what self-love was. So I definitely think affirmations are a big thing.
Well, that sounds like a great note to end on today. Well, thank you again, everybody, for being a part of today's conversation. Shrek opens on March 11th, and anybody interested in tickets or reading more about it can go to our website at jpas.org, and they can get tickets there as well. Again, thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you all at the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.